Economic rent or rent seeking. What exactly is that, and why is that sort of a challenge or maybe a hurdle in a capitalistic system?
Yeah, so economic rents is not the rent you pay your landlord. It's the additional profit that a company or person can make just because they control something, not because they're producing more, adding more value to society. So if you control an asset, like if you're Facebook and you have this platform, you're a monopoly, you can charge whatever you want. So like maybe if you charged a third of what you were charging, maybe Facebook would still operate and the investors would be happy, but they can charge more because they're a monopoly. Or your local, if you're in an area where you only have access to one cell phone company or or one provider of a key service, they're basically a monopoly and they can charge you whatever they want. The economic rents is the profit above and beyond what they would need to charge you to keep offering the service in a capitalist system. The additional amount is called the rent, and it's called a rent because, well, it kind of recognizes who should be owning, who the owner should be. It should be us. Like they should not keep, or actually, it means that they're basically charging you a rent, by not offering you any value in return. So it's basically the excess money people get without working, but just by holding things and controlling things in a monopolistic way. And traditionally, the main sources of rent was land rents, because the nobility in Europe, the feudal class before that led to the foundings of America, they had all the land and they just charged people rent, and people had to work harder and harder to pay that rent, and that's why we had peasants and serfs. So it got so bad. That's why everyone left and came here to find free land where they didn't have to pay rent to anybody. So economic rents is being seen by economists as one of the biggest problems slowing down capitalism right now, because more and more businesses are rent seeking, which means trying to make more money just by exerting more control as opposed to adding value. They do that by lobbying government for special privileges, by anti-competitive laws. They do that through control of natural resources, whether it's oil fields or mine fields, and keeping more of the profit than they've earned. Um, yeah, they do that whenever they engage in anti-competitive behavior. So when Facebook bought WhatsApp and Instagram, you could say that was rent seeking, because if they hadn't bought WhatsApp or Instagram, they would have had two competitors that would have been like challenging them for advertising revenues. So they didn't buy those to innovate, because what the fuck, nothing has changed with WhatsApp and Instagram in 10 years. They bought it and they sunk it. Nothing changed. Like, I'm really mad about that. WhatsApp should have been independent. It could have been like WeChat in China. It would have been like an everything app, but they did nothing with it. And that's an example of rent seeking, so they can consolidate more profit. So, one of the ways that capitalism works is it rewards innovation, creating new things that help people, that solve needs. But rent seeking is not capitalist. It's more feudalist. It's simply, making money by being a monopoly, and that's not capitalist. That's why, in the 1960s and 50s and 70s, and there was much more attention paid to reducing monopolistic gain, which means reducing the economic rents that those companies could enjoy, so that we can all benefit. So maybe more philosophically, I've thought a lot about how do we create a society where everyone benefits from technological progress, from growth in society. Like, what is a fair source of income to pay people a social dividend so that we all benefit directly? And I think it's this idea of economic rents, because that's fundamentally unearned income. We agree that you should work for what you earn, but the rents, by its definition, is extra money you get having not worked more for it. So rents increase as technological progress improves. The rental value of land increases. The power of monopolies increase as different industries are consolidating and fewer competitors. They're making more rent, and that rent should belong to the people. And I think that is how we get to a future where everyone benefits. So it's kind of a complex topic, which is, I think, why not a lot's been done about economic rents. But I think it's just so fundamental, especially as we're in a system where we're competing with countries like China, who are a little better at capturing economic rents. They're both capitalist and socialist, but also what they're good at is capturing more of the unearned income of the economic rents and funneling that money back into infrastructure that people need. For instance, in the 1970s, when China started to liberalize and to explore free market principles, they told farmers, "Hey, you can keep everything you make, but you have to lease the land from us. So they allowed private tenure, like guaranteed security of the land, but they kept leasing the land. But farmers could keep what they made, and they could plant whatever they want. So they're no longer in a autocratic system. Well, that led to multiple decades of 10% year on year the GDP growth, because farmers were unleashed to keep more of the money more of the value of their hard work, and the value of land, which they didn't work for, it just happens because of societal progress, was being paid back. So that's a clear example of 30 years of dramatic 10% year over year growth happening because China recognized the difference between between the economic rent, the unearned income, and the actual profit that the farmers should keep for themselves and not pay to the government. And even now, China and places like Singapore and other parts of the world have a land leasing system where they lease land for like multiple decades, maybe 90 years or something, and then they release it, and then they release it again when that lease expires, which means that at least clumsily along those deadlines, those lease deadlines, the value of land, the value that society has created comes back to the government. And because of that, researchers have shown that that's why there's so much infrastructure investment in China, while tax rates are slightly lower than they are here. Where's that money coming from? It's coming from the capturing of this public value that the community has created and being reinvested in the community through infrastructure that people need.
Yeah, and if we look at China, I mean, over the past 10, 20 years, we see them grow into this superpower right before our eyes. Do you think that their approach to economic rents plays a huge part in that?
I think so. Like as I mentioned just now about the relationship to land, that land and property is leased. I don't personally agree with that system. I think it's because it kind of when you're leasing land and property together, it's private, but only for like 90 years or something, and then it's not private, then it's resold. That is a way to kind of approximate, like in a more clumsy way, to gain some of the rents back for society. But a much better way would be an annual land value tax, where if we instead of paying income taxes, we would pay tax for the amount of land we use, and that way the tax system would be collecting the growing value of land and then giving it back to us in the form of infrastructure and societal investments and all the things that government provides to society. But yeah, China has done a better job at capturing the rents, whether it's through this system of land leasing or whether it's through state-owned companies that provide certain services that otherwise would usually be services that would capture much more economic rent in other countries than it does there by being partially or fully state-owned. I'm not condoning state-owned enterprises. I'm simply stating that in certain industries, state-owned, actually closer to home here in Quebec, the Quebec government bought Hydro One. It was a hydroelectric plant that was owned by foreign investors. So those foreign investors were collecting excess profits off water, what people need to survive. And the government's like, well, wait, it's our water. Why would we just be funneling money out to foreign investors? So they just bought the plant, and now Quebecers can pay less for water. So in places where there's a natural monopoly or it's easy to collect excess profits and rents off of society, especially for basic needs. Most people would agree that natural monopolies, that's where you should have state-owned companies, because if it's a natural monopoly, you're dumb if you're just letting companies take excess profit there. It doesn't make any sense at all. So I think on the whole, that's China's done but it's not a Chinese phenomenon. European countries, many countries, have partial state ownership on things where there's where it's a natural resource, where there's a monopoly would arise. In Norway, Norway's done a better job than Alaska in capturing more of the oil revenues. Close to 80% of profits in the oil sector in Norway are collected and put into a sovereign wealth fund. That fund now is worth more than $1 trillion, and that fund is used to pay pensions, to reduce taxes. In other words, if that fund didn't exist, people would have to pay more income tax to have the same services that they have. But because the fund exists, people keep more money in their pockets, and that's from the proceeds of oil. Now, I think the Alaska model is better, where they pay people dividends directly, but the Norway model is more common because there are over 60 sovereign wealth funds around the world that are contributing money to government revenues, which means less tax for people. And even in Texas, people like to think that, you know, what does China and Texas have in common? It's Texas has a fund that comes from land ownership that is leased out, and that fund pays for the school system. So why does Texas have no income tax? It's not because they're great conservatives. It's because they're using commonwealth, the value of nature, in this fund that's paying for school instead of people's income taxes paying for school. So that's a precedent that is a good precedent anywhere in the world, is to make sure you're capturing the rents and profits from the value of natural environments to make our lives better.